Hello, everybody. I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro, along with Jessica Tarlov, Jesse Waters, Katie Pavlich, and Greg Gutfeld in... It's not corduroy. What is it?
It's a pilled shirt.
It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. It is going to be a nail-biter. The latest head-to-head matchup from the New York Times shows a dead heat. An even 48-48 split between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Both candidates out in Texas today and ramping up the trash talk.
Kamala is here in Texas to rub shoulders with woke celebrities. Isn't that exciting?
The comment that Donald Trump made about America being the trash can of the world, he really belittles our country.
Worst of all, Kamala refuses to stop importing these killers into our country.
America deserves better.
And even though things are neck and neck, one campaign is privately in freakout mode. According to Axios, Democrat insiders are already worrying that Harris has blown it. And some are even pointing their finger at Joe Biden if Kamala loses. Check this out.
She's in her 92nd day in the campaign. This is more like a European snap election than anything else. And so this is her big challenge. If she loses, it'll be in part because she wasn't the nominee in time to really grow. But she's got a succinct message.
And if this doesn't sound like Hillary 2016 all over again, Kamala is rolling out the red carpet for celebrities to headline her closing rallies. Beyonce will reportedly hit the stage at a Harris event in Houston later tonight. That's after Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Springsteen brought out their star power to a Georgia rally. Watch.
I'm Bruce Springsteen, and I am here today to support Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Donald Trump is running to be an American tyrant. He does not understand this country, its history, or what it means to be deeply American.
We've heard her favorite curse word is a favorite of mine, too. But I ain't gonna say that word. But I don't know about you, but that's the kind of president I can stand behind.
Katie, I'm going to go to you first. You know, we just heard Jim Messina saying that as a candidate, Kamala Harris didn't have enough time to grow as a candidate. Now, isn't being the understudy for 3 years and 10 months of the president of the United States enough time to grow into the race?
You could argue that if the race were longer, she would be in an even worse shape because as time goes on and the more she has to do publicly, the worse her poll numbers get and the more independents are going over to the Trump campaign. And what did they expect? I mean, they had an option to do an open convention, to have tried and true candidates who maybe have won elections before, not just the U.S. Senate, but maybe gone through a primary process and lost, but who have been tested. And they decided not to do that. They decided to get behind Kamala Harris, assuming that she would win. Joe Biden pushed against it and was forced out. And now they're going to blame Biden for not getting out sooner. I mean, you have Barack Obama saying that maybe Biden was a better choice at this point. And so I think that if she were on the campaign longer, she would have some problems. But things are certainly not moving in the direction they want them to, and they are literally running out of time.
You know, Jesse, the majority of uncommitted voters are apparently between the ages of 18 and 34. You think dragging out Samuel L. Jackson or Bruce Springsteen are going to appeal to them?
No, the McDonald's visit affected more people than any of that. They said, I think 37% of young Americans who saw that visit now are leaning towards Trump. I was at my mother's house this morning, Judge Jeanine, and my dad opened his phone while my mom was making me scrambled eggs. Aww. And he goes, oh, Jesse, look at this. Axios says nervous Democrats fear that Kamala is blowing it. And I looked at my mother, and I could have been a jerk. But I'm not a jerk. I'm a good sport, and I'm a kind son. I'm a compassionate American. And I just said, Can I have my eggs, please?
First.
I didn't rub it in. I'm not trying to brag. You look at these polls, Trump has tied, Judge Janine. This is the first time he's ever been tied going into a race like this. He was down big with Hillary, down big with Biden. On television, I say the race is tight. Because when you have a tied national poll with Donald Trump, on television, I say the race is tight. I say other things to my friends. Not to my mother, but my friends. This is funny that they're blaming Joe Biden for not getting out earlier. How about just blaming Joe Biden for the last 4 years? People don't want to vote Democrat because it's been a mess. The border's wide open. People's pocketbooks are getting smashed. It has nothing to do with the coup and the timing of it. That should have happened in a normal primary process. Then maybe we could have a regular candidate instead of Kamala Harris, who's not ready, never was ready. So if you bring out Beyonce, I don't even think she's coming in. You want to know why? They told us she was going to come in at the DNC, and Roy Cooper showed up, the governor of North Carolina. So I think Roy's going to show tonight in Texas.
You know, Jessica, they spent $1 billion on this campaign. They tried joy, and then they tried the threat to democracy, and then they decided, well, we'll put her out more in the media. And still, Donald Trump is chipping away. Is it a bad campaign, or is she a bad candidate?
Well, get back to me on November 5th, and I'll tell you what actually happened.
Well, there's people in your party who are
I know,
apparently
you always say they
out.
did. It's we freak out every election. We're true to form. Democrats are anxious. We are nervous. Our sheets are soiled, not in the actual gross way, but in the sweating it out because this is so tight. The New York Times Siena poll, people were waiting for it. It's an A+ poll. There were nuggets of good news in it, though. So 15% are undecided, and she has a 10-point advantage with them. In the Emerson poll, she's up 60-36 on that. The Harvard Youth poll came out. You talk about the youngins and the McDonald's photo op. She has a bigger lead with young voters than Biden did, 60-32. The Marist early voter data looks good. I went in a time machine, I guess, while you were visiting your mom. So I went back to 2012, and I looked at the Real Clear Politics average on election day, not even 11 days out. And Obama was only up 0.7, which really didn't jive with how I was feeling about the election. Mitt Romney, the most sexist man that ever lived, if I recall correctly, had this huge surge at the end that made a lot of people like Jesse feel confident. And then Obama ended up winning by 3.9 points. Now, I don't know if that's what's going to happen, but we have seen a jump ball that ended up going in the Democrats' direction. And one of the theories about what's going on with Trump is that he is certainly getting more support, but that it's an inefficient vote. So he's doing really well in Florida, better than he needs to, in California, better than he needs to, in New York. States that he's not going to end up winning in California and New York, but that he's not putting together the coalition that he needs in the swing states for it. We'll see if that pans out. That would be the best route for the Democrats if we're going to win this. But we never assumed that we were going to win. That's the thing.
All right, Greg,
Yes,
wrap it
you
up.
did.
Where
No.
does the
whole reason
jump
Biden
ball
left.
go?
Well, first of all, uncommitted voters need to be committed. How can you not know? I mean, it's like you're not sure whether you should get a kiss on the cheek or a slap in the face. No offense, Doug Emhoff. But Democrats should freak out because if they lose, it is, according to them, the end of the world. I mean, it's over. I mean, Trump's a tyrant, Hitler, you name it, we'll talk about it. If they're lucky, their early prediction that the Earth was going to end in the late 20s will maybe come earlier.
I'm hoping for that.
Yeah,
one,
you're
actually.
hoping. See, and I want to piggyback on what you said about she wasn't the nominee long enough. Well, whose fault is that?
Right.
You all knew that Joe Biden's brain was French toast, and you hid it from America. You treated his senility like Bigfoot. You know, the sightings were hoaxes and the video evidence were deep fakes. You could have had the 25th Amendment. You should have had the 25th Amendment, you know, and then maybe you might have had a good candidate. But instead, you're stuck with this pretender in a pantsuit. And, you know, it's your fault. And you're right. 3.5 years, it's more than enough time to learn. But she wasn't learning, man. She chose wine over work. As for the celeb power, this is after, you know, the Beetlejuice star Michael Keaton calls Trump supporters naive and easily persuadable. Well, what's more easily persuadable than a voter whose decisions are influenced by pop culture? That's actually more insulting to your voter that you think trotting out Beyonce will get them to put a ring on it. Maybe if the Democrats think your vote can be swayed by a celebrity, they don't think of you much at all.
All right. Ahead, the Democrats are getting mighty desperate. Hillary Clinton is now comparing.
With 11 days to go in a razor-tight race, Dems are pulling out their most desperate move in the Democratic playbook, calling Donald Trump Hitler. Hillary Clinton is coming out of the woodwork to smear Donald Trump's upcoming Madison Square Garden rally in New York as the second coming of the Nazis.
Trump actually reenacting the Madison Square Garden rally in 1939. I don't think we can ignore it. Please open your eyes to the danger that this man poses to our country, because I think it is clear and present for anybody paying attention.
But she's not alone. Kamala and Obama are also ramping up their dark rhetoric.
In politics, a good rule of thumb is don't say you want to do anything like Hitler.
Donald Trump has become more confused, more unstable, and more angry. It's either Donald Trump in there stewing over his enemies list, or me working for you, checking off my to-do list.
And if you're wondering why this tactic sounds familiar, it's because it is. Democrats have called the Republican nominee Hitler or a fascist for the past 60 years. So, Judge, the Madison Square Garden has hosted a number of these kinds of rallies. The Democratic National Convention in 1924, 1976, 1980, and 1992.
I'm so glad you mentioned 1992 because that's when Bill Clinton accepted the Democratic nomination for president. Bill Clinton, the husband of Hillary, who thinks that if you go to Madison Square Garden, it's got to be a Nazi rally. The old adage stays true. You point one finger at someone, four fingers point back at you. So, I mean, they are the ones. They talk about fascism. They didn't want us, to have freedom of speech during COVID. We couldn't talk about the origin. We couldn't talk about the medications. Religions, institutions were closed down when casinos and movie theaters were open. I mean, everything about the Democrat Party during COVID and times of emergency is about, totalitarianism and authoritarianism. And then they call him Hitler. They call this man Hitler when there were two attempts that we know of on his life. One, a bullet hit his head. Mm-hmm. And yet they feel justified in calling the man Hitler. And, I don't think it's any coincidence that the joy candidate that Kamala was supposed to be has now gone to darkness because she doesn't have a positive message. She has nothing that she can say or explain to the American people that they can grab onto and say there's hope for me, other than hate and despising people. She's got a failed economy. She wants to fix prices. She's got a housing market. She wants to inflate the cost of houses and businesses for black people. She wants to add an unconstitutional benefit. I mean, and why would Bob Casey and who was Tammy Baldwin and all of those Democrats running for Senate in the United States Senate support Hitler? Yeah. He's not Hitler.
Right. So, Jesse, there is some other symbolism here. You have, of course, if you're a New Yorker, one of the biggest accomplishments you can have is selling out Madison Square Garden. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump is a New Yorker. And also, I saw today on Twitter that Frank Sinatra's comeback concert was about 50 years ago, October 13th.
Grand Kleagle.
And the rally will be on Sunday.
Everybody knows Sinatra was racist. Listen, Kamala Harris actually said that Hitler has some great ideas when she said that Donald Trump's border wall was a good idea.
And featured it in her ads?
Kamala Harris stole Hitler's playbook. She said she wants no tax on tips. That's what Hitler said. If you think about it, CNN held a Hitler town hall. Kamala Harris shook Hitler's hand before she debated him. Chuck Schumer was palling around with Hitler at the Al Smith dinner, having a grand old time.
I was disappointed, to say the least.
The Israeli prime minister said Hitler is the greatest friend to the Israeli people he's ever had. See what I'm doing here? See what I'm doing here,
I'm catching
Jessica?
on. It took me a
Are you
second,
catching
but
on
I'm
here?
there.
This is how ridiculous
I hope
this
it's taken out of context.
It will be.
It probably will be. They're calling him Hitler because they can't criticize his policies. If you think about it, she's basically saying she's going to build a wall now. She's kept his tariffs. She's kept most of his tax cuts. She kept his vaccine. They don't want to talk about policies because he wins on policies. So they're just going to call him names. They say this is a divisive time. We're going to turn the page on name calling and division. And in the last 24 hours, Biden and Harris have said we have to lock up the fascist.
Yeah. And Jessica, Kamala Harris has said she wants to get rid of the filibuster to push through their agenda. She wants to pack the Supreme Court, which would also make it so that the Supreme Court is a legislative body for Democrats, not necessarily a separate branch of government. And clearly they're doing this because they're getting some kind of data that shows it's working, right? Or are they just throwing it up against the wall since everything else is not working for them?
No, there is data that people don't have faith in the Supreme Court, which right now is an arm of the Republican
on the
Party.
Fascism part.
Oh,
calling him Hitler.
100%. That's what's resonating with right-leaning independents and with Republican voters that are open to voting for her, that Haley block, the Liz Cheney block. But they aren't using this because they're not getting it from a direct source that worked with him. So they're getting this from Mark Milley and from John Kelly, who gave on-the-record interviews. You can hear it in John Kelly's own voice talking about it. And the central premise of this and of so many things when it comes to Donald Trump is that we should just not take his words seriously. That Kamala's words matter and what Donald Trump says doesn't. Because guess what? Donald Trump calls Kamala a fascist quite regularly. He did it last month a couple times. He did it in August. Jake Tapper, just in the last hour, was playing audio of it. And so not only does he call her a fascist, he also calls her a communist. And last time I checked, communists were pretty bad. Mao, Stalin, they're responsible for over 100 million people's deaths. George Bush commemorated the lives lost to communism in 2007, I believe that it was. So spare me, as usual. I don't think anyone should be called Hitler. Hitler is a uniquely depraved human being. And I don't want to use his name in those contexts. But to say that this is something that they are inventing versus that they're getting it from the people who worked for him is absolutely not fair. And I would just say, if you are upset that you're being called an authoritarian, go and take a look at his Truth Social post from right before the show started. This cease and desist letter that he has about prosecuting people he suspects of cheating. And this extends to lawyers, political operatives, donors, illegal voters.
Oh, lawfare.
So why
Sounds
didn't they
like what they've done
indict
to him.
Hillary Clinton when he had the goods on
Because there was
her?
nothing on her.
Are you kidding?
I am not
Oh,
kidding.
she didn't have any classified documents?
Are you kidding? Are you talking
She
about the
only
small
used
C
her
again?
laptop and her phone.
She did-
Where did she keep the classified
Why
documents
James
and the
Comey,
emails?
who was a Republican,
Okay,
by
and
the way.
already he's talking about Hunter Biden. Donald
That's
Trump
'cause
is
he
trying
wants a
to
pardon
make
if he
sure.
loses.
Donald Trump is trying to make sure that he heals the country. So don't make it sound
Heals
like
the country.
Yeah.
So it's much of this projection on behalf of the
Well,
Democrats.
these are not. These two situations are not equal. The Democrats prefer that when they call you names, you don't call them names back.
Right.
So this is Trump saying fascist, whatever, relatively recent after, 7, 8 years of calling him a Hitler, a Nazi, whatever. People, there's no comparison between calling somebody a socialist and a communist, even though you cite those millions and millions of deaths. I wish it were the same. But in our society, it's not. People think Nazis are worse than communists. And you're right. More communists have.
We need better education than about Stalin.
And so, why is that? In your party, you have people who actually call themselves socialists. You have people associated who endorse your candidate, who are communists, who belong to the Communist Party. You don't have people going around, I'm a fascist. Are you a fascist? I work for the fascist party. So they're not the same. They're not the same. My question is, if Hillary and others are intent on essentially calling Trump Hitler, which is what they're doing, what do they suggest we do? You know, to vote Kamala? Is that what it is? Seems like it's a bit overboard. Seems like they're basically saying they want you to do something else. Unless she doesn't mean it. She might not mean it. But what happens to all of these people who buy into this vision of the world if Trump wins? What kind of collapse will we see? How will they feel when they were told that he was Hitler and then he's president? What are they going to do? What can we do about it as the people that, hey, I'm voting for Trump? What happens to me? You know, what do I do? We're all in this together. We're going to have how many people are we going to have on the street that believe Hitler won? And what are they going to do to us? Meanwhile, imagine if Kamala Harris won. Will you see the same mental, violent implosion? There might be calls that the election should have been more transparent. But the fact is, Republicans and libertarians, righties, we just get on with our lives because we compartmentalize politics. It's not part of our family. It's not part of our, our hobby. We have other interests. But when you make it all about your identity, what is identity politics? That is a Democrat's life. If their life is that Trump is a Nazi, what do they got left if he wins? It's a good question.
What do you say about the MAGA base that still thinks that he won the election and the people who showed up on January 6th?
That's completely up to them. It doesn't bother me.
We don't control how people think.
We just move on with our lives.
We should control how people. What do you want to do? Jail people for what they think?
I want people to understand that he lost the election. That he continues to lie about it.
People think whatever they want. This is America.
They think what he tells them.
We have to move on, but I'm sure we'll keep talking about this at some point. Kamala is skipping out on Joe Rogan, but Donald Trump is more than happy to sit down with a popular podcaster.
Kamala Harris is chickening out of her big Joe Rogan interview with her mouthpiece blaming on a scheduling conflict. Watch.
We talked with Rogan and his team about the podcast. Unfortunately, it isn't going to work out right now because of the scheduling of this period of the campaign. But, she's taking her message to these huge platform audiences. Donald Trump with Joe Rogan, that's going to be an interesting thing to watch.
Yeah.
An interesting thing to watch, indeed. Donald Trump more than happy to bring his MAGA message to Joe Rogan's massive audience of over 14 million listeners. He's sitting down with the popular podcast host during a visit to Austin, Texas today. And it could prove to be a critical interview in a razor-tight race. So, Judge Jeanine, she has not done a lot of campaign events this week.
Well,
how do you see she has a scheduling conflict?
First of all, she took a day and a half to do the CNN interview, which was a disaster. And secondly, she's ducking Joe Rogan. The woman is incapable of a conversation. Do you know Axios reported that she actually had to do some kind of mock dinners on how she could communicate with donors during dinners, how to hold a wine glass, how to have a conversation. Remember, she didn't go to the Al Smith dinner, and in a racist clothes, you don't insult Roman Catholics. You just don't do it. Okay, because she can't even be self-deprecating with a script. Even her message was made by someone else. So am I surprised she's not doing it? Absolutely not. First of all, she's in Texas. What's the problem? She's already there where Joe Rogan is in Texas. It is the #1 podcast in the country, if not in the world, as far as I know. And you need men? Go to Joe. That's where you go. And finally, I don't care if you have a campaign rally, a dinner, an interview, you cancel them all for Joe Rogan. And this just reeks of her team probably trying to set parameters and Joe Rogan saying, no parameters, thank you. She either sits down and talks like everybody else or forget it. The woman is incapable of giving a substantive answer or having a communication. We've watched it for 95 days.
Hey, Greg, she doesn't have to do 3 hours. She can do an hour. She could do 45.
I don't blame her. Kamala doing like a multi-hour podcast is like you doing Jeopardy. It's like, it's just a complete disaster.
I agree.
The one thing that she didn't like was follow-up questions. And if you watch Joe Rogan, it's 3 hours of follow-up questions. He's just like this. What do you mean?
Yeah.
What I don't understand what's going on. And that's why he's so good, is that he kind of like, he draws you out into a universe that's beyond your little lily pad of fixed commentary. This is why this is kind of a big deal, because it really is a contrast between types. Trump is, whether you like him or not, he's stamina personified. The guy could talk The View off a meat truck. She's sluggishness personified. She appears irritated and annoyed, almost like, why must I do this? Her face is always, why must I do this? Why am I here? She seems tired before she starts. One of the deceptions of that claim that she was the last to leave the room, it said nothing about what she did in that room. You know, she could have been texting emojis to Jussie Smollett.
Katie Pavlich.
MAGA hat emojis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, she usually sends men out to do her dirty work. You know, if she needs men, she sends Walls. She sends Barack. You know, she says she needs men, but she's never personally campaigning for them.
Well, she also likes to have other people speak for her because she's not very good at speaking for herself. Look, it's all about risk versus reward. And they've seen over the past 2 weeks how it's gone with her being out there doing more interviews, and the polling has gone in the opposite direction of where they needed to go. When you're in a podcast setting, everything is fair game, especially Joe Rogan. And the same goes for Trump, by the way. He may be confronted with some questions and some clips that he might not be so happy with, but the difference is that he's showing up and he's willing to be confronted with it. You know, Joe Rogan will pull up articles or videos and play them back to his guests and have them respond in real time. Brett Baer did that in a similar way when he interviewed Kamala. So clearly the campaign doesn't think that they're going to be able to change the minds of his listeners to get them to vote, and that's why they've chosen not to have him, or have her rather, go on the podcast.
Okay, the Democrats have come a long way. Remember in COVID, they said that this guy was killing people.
Right.
He was spewing misinformation, just responsible for death and destruction. Now they're all just angling to get on a show. What happened?
Well, they're not, because she's not going.
But they're
Which
trying to. Guy, they said it was like the devil.
Well, she shook hands with Hitler a few weeks ago, so everything is child's play in comparison. I am of the mindset that she should absolutely do this interview. He was gushing over her debate performance afterwards, saying she absolutely demolished Trump and that she was great, et cetera. That doesn't mean that he won't push her on tough topics, especially immigration. He lives in Texas. But I think it's a missed opportunity. At this point, there are so few undecideds, and you hear over and over again that they want to hear more from her. So give them that chance. But a couple of things that I wanted to add to it. On the stamina front, so the days that people say she wasn't doing anything, she did a Telemundo interview, she did an NBC interview, she did a CNN town hall. She hasn't been taking a break, and Trump has been canceling events right and left. He had an NRA rally he canceled, a CNBC interview, and an NBC interview.
Because he's doing
and
like
if he
5
really
a day.
whatever. Then talk to your scheduler and say, stop scheduling me because I can't do it because I'm a little bit old and I'm a little bit tired. Now,
Really?
Or maybe he's shy.
Really?
okay, he's shy.
Yeah.
He's not shy.
No, I said shot.
Well, thankfully, he hasn't been.
No, I'm
shot
just saying
in
that,
some
like
time.
anybody,
Anyway,
I think he's.
if
I
he
think you
was-
could give him a break.
But the point is, if he would go anywhere, then he would have accepted Alex Cooper's invitation to go on Call Her Daddy. So before she did the Kamala interview, you're laughing. That's the second biggest podcast in the country.
I don't think those voters are going to be voting for Trump.
That's not someone who's fearless then. That's not someone who'll go anywhere. He should show up
He
and
went
tell
to
her.
National Black Journalist Convention. That was
Yes,
pretty
I
fearless.
understand.
He did CNN town hall.
Guys,
He should do Red
just
Scare.
stop moving.
He should
the
do
goal.
Red Scare.
There are lots of podcasts. I wish he'd go on my NBA podcast. It doesn't matter. The point is, these are the two biggest podcasts.
You
One
have a
is
podcast?
no, I do actually have a podcast, but not about the NBA. I enjoy NBA podcasts.
Oh.
It's nice that you know that about me. Anyway, he should show up for the lady pod if he wants her. If she
It
should
doesn't
show
have
up
to
for
be
the
that
dude
lady
pod.
pod. It could
What?
be other lady
well,
pods.
what lady pod?
I just gave you one. Red Scare is way better.
How many listeners does it have? 5 million?
I don't know. I'm not like
that's
you.
the
I
point.
don't read the blogs.
Blogs aren't even a thing anymore.
Before we go, I want to just ask Greg, did you get that shirt pilled from regular wear and tear,
Is
or did
that
you buy
new?
it pilled?
You know, when I get home, I'm going to ask the unskilled labor in my basement who's been pilling my shirts.
Stop talking about your wife. Okay.
You keep calling it a shirt. It's a shacket.
A shacket.
It's a shacket.
It's a pilled
Yeah,
shacket.
it's a shacket.
We're not going to tell anybody how much it costs. I should, just to piss him
Yeah,
off.
how much does it cost?
It's
a lot.
You can't afford it, and you can afford a lot. I've seen the jewels.
tao bin thôi cứ đi mau mang mình rồi cái chuyện này rồi nhuôi đây làm mình quen pro mình pro xoay đi bên đây nằm chọc như vậy wow sâu nhỉ tại cây này ta nó sạch bên trong nó bốc bốc này đi dạ vậy thọ điệu pin thôi thọ vậy nghe còn lợn ô này gì nó mang nhuyễn lên nhuyễn đấy đây được màu bốc ấy mà cho cái đây phải đường cao đó cái này từng này còn về đây bên này đầm cầm này mang này cứ cái lấy cầm cá lấy cái mát segre này cái mát segre màu bốc hả? Bánh nữa, màu bốc hả? Vô bánh nữa, thôi mất rồi đi chỗ khác đi. Còn mình sẽ màu bốc nó bốc chưa club nữa. Thôi đi. Nhẹ thôi,